specifically the use of seed oils. There's the main academic institution for heart disease is called the American Heart Association. It's recognized worldwide as where people go for advice about heart health. They were funded in the middle of the 20th century by a multi-million-dollar grant from Procter and Gamble company. Procter and Gamble company was a company that took an industrial lubricant that was originally developed for submarine U-boats in World War I, German U-boats. And this industrial oil, they found out that people would actually eat it and consume it. And they renamed it Crisco and marketed it as a substitute for butter and as a cooking oil. And Crisco was one of the original seed oils, but it basically spawned a whole generation of canola oil and corn oil and all the other oils. But the American Heart Association, to this day on their website, recommends seed oils and on the products as well, like canola oil, as being somehow heart healthy. When actually I think the evidence is pretty strong. We talk about in the book with references that these oils are pro-oxidative and they're not healthy oils. But it's complex because the seed oils, the canola oil, actually lowers LDL cholesterol, which the American Heart Association, that is their main
focus.
Their main focus and their mechanism for heart disease is LDL cholesterol with statins and all that, and that's a whole conversation in itself too.
Yeah, how much time you got?
Yeah,
the American Heart Association is saying, hey, it's okay, or pushing these seed oils. At this point, it has to be known that there's certainly an argument being made against them. You're part of this, and as the layman, as someone who's like, I would say I'm not the most health conscious person. I'm certainly not, I would argue, on the bad end of that spectrum. But just in the last year, again, with part of like the RFK, and then Zach, who is it? Was it the Means? Was it Casey and
Kelly Means?
I listened to that Tucker episode where I think they went into detail about seed oil. So for the first time, again, as someone who doesn't follow it as my profession the way you do, like just in the last 6 months, I've noticed my wife and I are talking about this at home. So clearly there's two different schools of thought, and maybe that wasn't always the case for a long period of time. Why are they still pushing that? Has anyone at the American Heart Association said, hey, time out, maybe we should revisit these things?
I think it's entering the public consciousness, but before recently, this has come out with Casey and Kelly Means, like you say. Kate Shanahan's another one. Dr. Shanahan has been talking about this, but before that, it's really under the radar. I mean, once you start looking for seed oils, they're in practically everything, every salad dressing. The hummus I get at Trader Joe's, which I think is healthy. If I don't look at the label, it's got seed oils in it. The olive oil I want to use is adulterated with seed oils. They're in all the junk foods, basically. So they get into everything like that.
I'm smiling because like this has been an almost nightly conversation for the last 6 months, 12 months, like at my house, like, oh, there's seed oils in this, like you're never going to believe what I found in that. And then just, I was laughing about the butter, like, and this is probably not good. I don't know. You tell me, you're the doctor. Is like my 3-year-old, we put his plate on for dinner the other night. I'm sitting right next to him and my wife cuts off like a chunk of butter and he's just eating it. I'm like, babe, you can't give him butter. That's not good for him. And she's like, well, I don't know if that's actually the case. So I was like, okay, maybe I need to rethink everything I know or everything I was taught.
Yeah. I mean, I used to, stay away from butter and all these things. I now believe it's one of the healthiest things you can eat, good for your 3-year-old.
This is amazing. This is the first thing in my life that I like, that it's like, no, you can eat and eat more of butter.
Yeah.
Can we just make ice cream healthy? Is there any way to do that?
Well, the ice cream, the fat in the ice cream, I mean, the high fat yogurt is healthy. What makes it unhealthy is the sugar. Sugar is pro-oxidative. It for all sorts of reasons. But one other thing on the seed oils that's really interesting, talking about saturated fat, is in the 1990, famously, through a drive of a billionaire, wanted to get people to eat less saturated fat, which again, American Heart Association, they believe saturated fat is harmful, which it's really not. And so up until that point, in every fryer in the world, practically, the way to fry foods was using saturated fat, animal fat, beef tallow, that sort of thing, which is healthy. It's stable at high temperatures, and it's good for you.
Mm-hmm.
And based on his campaigning, and also for the Center for Science in the Public Interest, which is one place they went really off the rails, they convinced McDonald's and Burger King to switch their fryers from healthy beef tallow to seed oils. And seed oils are actually much cheaper because they're subsidized by the federal government. Corn, soybeans are paid for by tax dollars with the Farm Bill.
I was going to say to support the farmers, right?
Yeah. So the price is artificially lower. That's why many junk foods are cheaper than healthy foods because of these subsidies. But back to the fryers. So at that point, when it was okay to substitute these cheap industrial oils, basically worldwide, everybody followed suit. And today, most frying is done with these seed oils, which unfortunately, as Casey and Callie probably talked about, they're unstable at high temperature and they break down into various toxic things. And kind of a tsunami of chronic diseases started in the 1980s and 1990s. Mm-hmm. Everything started to go wrong, and seed oils probably played a major role in that. It's maybe not the only cause. There are other factors in our health that also changed then. But it's really interesting how today it's almost impossible to get something cooked in beef tallow unless you go to a special restaurant and they specially advertise it. Everything now is seed oils. So if you want to avoid seed oils, don't eat anything that's fried, really.
So went to Brown, Ivy League, then University of Virginia, which is a very, very good school, then taught at UCLA in an industry that I'd say is generally pretty merit badge focused, the medical profession. You have a lot of good degrees, right? Good merit badge. Like those are a lot of good schools. Nobody would question your credentials. What was the first moment in your career kind of leading into culminating in writing a book about it, but like where you said, I don't know if this is true, or I don't know if this is accurate. I actually don't necessarily agree with this.
Yeah, that's actually it was I'd been a professor for a long time. I was happy being a professor, basically practicing medicine, writing papers. I've written hundreds of peer-reviewed papers. The book is critical of Western medicine. Let me say, I'm from Western medicine. I am Western medicine. I'm part of the problem. I'm a professor. At last time I checked, I still have my job at the medical school. So I want to go on record as saying that Western medicine has transformed our lives, I think, in the 20th century, those of us who are alive in the 20th century, by reducing, making our lives so much better, public health, and the pills and surgeries that were developed were nothing short of revolutionary. The problem is, I think, is in the 21st century, we're facing a wave of chronic diseases, a tsunami of chronic diseases that were present in the 20th century, but in the 21st century, they're now in biblical proportions, unprecedented in history. These things include everything from obesity, diabetes, cancer, heart disease, Alzheimer's disease, even mental illness. And the problem is when Western medicine takes the same pills and surgeries that were so effective in the 20th century and says, okay, let's throw these at them, they don't really work. They in many cases will control the symptoms, which is good, but in most cases they don't control the underlying disease. So the disease continues to progress and they're just getting worse and worse and worse. And that's the problem. That's what I began to address. And back to your question, what made me do it was made me look at this is, I'd like to say, hey, I just want to make the world a better place. But no, it wasn't any of that. I came down with 4 of those diseases myself, and I went to my doctor and, I said, and they prescribed one of these pills for each one. So I was on these prescription medicines, and I said, hey, what about lifestyle? Does that work? And they go, nah, not really. You're going to be on these pills for the rest of your life. So get used to it. And at that point, I knew enough about chronic diseases that it wasn't going to end well. And I had 2 kids that weren't even in elementary school at the time, and so that forced me to really deeply question if there were any other alternatives. And I realized there were. There's been a revolution in things.
What were the 4, if you don't mind my asking? What were the 4 chronic diseases?
Yeah, one was a type of arthritis called gout. Another was hypertension or high blood pressure, which today most adults have hypertension. Over 50% do. So I was in good company there. And the second was, or the third was prediabetes. My glucose was high. And the fourth one was abnormal blood lipids, dyslipidemia or blood fats. And these chronic diseases, most adults have at least one, and many have multiple ones of these chronic diseases that I mentioned.
Now, gout, that's a king's disease, right? It's a,
yeah.
It's a rumor. So we get to, was it true or not? Like was it King Henry VIII was the first person to suffer from gout? Because gout is, my understanding is like red meat and wine. And so it was like opulence and wealth. And
that's right.
It was hard to be overweight 500 years ago. Only a king could in theory afford it. But gout is, it's like pain in your feet is what I know.
Yeah, it's particularly in your big toe is the classic place. And it's
crystals, right? Or something.
Yeah, it's gout crystals literally in the joint, but it's incredibly painful. First time I got it, I thought I'd fractured my toe. I went to the emergency room and got an x-ray.
How old were you?
How old was I? I was in my 40s at the time, I think, or my 50s probably.
What in your understanding, what was the cause of it for you?
Well, I got the same recommendations, red meat and this kind of thing. But as we talk about in the book, there are other causes. In fact, the book talks about a unified underlying cause for all these diseases. In other words, how is gout related to hypertension? And how is diabetes related to blood fats? And they actually all are. And through the same lifestyle mechanisms, I was able to reverse those 4 chronic diseases and also decrease my risk for all the diseases I mentioned. And that's the beautiful point. It's like you don't have to do something different for Alzheimer's and, oh, no, I have to do something different for my heart disease. It's the same lifestyle tools that work for all of them.
Let's dive into that. You can take as long as you want. Like, I don't want to say, hey, make it in summary, but summarize like as much time as you need to summarize it. Like, what are those lifestyle changes that lead to mitigating all of these potential chronic diseases?
Yeah, it was basically 4 things it boils down to. One was nutrition, and that was foundational. Not only what I ate, but when I ate. Second was sleep, we talked about, quality and quantity of sleep. Third thing was exercise, both mental and physical exercise, which I never really paid enough attention to. And fourth is stress, but also a sense of mindset, a sense of purpose, kind of how we look at the world. Is the world a loving, beautiful place full of opportunities and kindness, or is it a terrible, horrible place full of danger and harm and having a goal of what we're living for?
So let me talk first about nutrition. What advice would you have for the audience in terms of, hey, we touched on seed oils and all that, but like, well, number one, read the book, right? Get the book. But for those listening today, from a nutrition standpoint, what are the do's and don'ts?
Yeah, it was for me and for most people, it comes down to 3 things. So what I did in my diet, which is transformative, and most people will see a significant improvement with this. But before I even changed what I ate, the first thing I did was just change when I ate. My mom, the dietitian, told me, eat many small meals throughout the day, just like my kids get snacks all day long at their schools. That's the belief that this is healthy. But actually, there's good evidence that we talk about in the book that it's actually not healthy to eat all the time, and it's healthier to have breaks between the time you eat. In other words, narrow your eating window. So the first thing I did was stop between meal snacks, and then eventually for me, I stopped breakfast, and then in many cases I don't eat lunch, and I just have 1 meal a day when my kids come home from school. That in itself, even without changing what you eat, will significantly improve your metabolic health. But then the 3 things to do the changes I made that people need to make, I believe, to be metabolically healthy is first, get rid of there are 3 macronutrients your audience may know about, which is fat and protein. We've all heard of those. Those are essential for life. If we don't eat those, we die. There's a third group called carbohydrates, which contain sugar and starches. These are actually not essential. They're several human civilizations that don't eat carbohydrates at all, and they do fine. Actually, they have less chronic disease. Carbohydrates are also bad because they drive insulin and drive inflammation. And so first thing I did was lowered the carbohydrates in my diet. So I increased the fat and lowered the carbohydrates, kind of keeping protein the same. But I basically went on a low carb diet, and that it was very helpful. The next thing I did, the second thing was I got rid of seed oils for the reason we talked about. They're pro-inflammatory. They're in junk foods everywhere. And then the third thing, I got rid of grains. And I'd always been taught that grains are healthy. Hippies, granola, it's all fiber, fiber, cereals. But actually, there's proteins in grain called, there's gluten, which is a protein that some people are allergic to. About 1 in 100 people. It's called celiac disease, which makes them very sick. So
one in how many?
About 1 in 100.
Okay.
But I believe, and there's good evidence, that actually a much higher percentage of people have low-grade inflammation or allergies to proteins in grains that drive inflammation at a low level. And inflammation is one of the root causes for all those chronic diseases and aging itself. So by avoiding grains, you can stop this inflammation. The other thing about grains, if that's not enough, in the United States, most, if not all, grains are literally soaked in something called glyphosate, which is a weed killer from Monsanto, which is outlawed in over 30 countries around the world because of association with cancer and other health concerns.
For us farmers, Roundup.
Roundup, exactly, yeah. And then finally, grains typically have large amounts of carbohydrate in them anyway. So back to reason one there.
So you just told us kind of like from a nutrition what to take out. So I want to like reverse engineer that. So proteins are good, right? Like meats. Okay.
Yep.
So that would be steaks, chickens, fishes, fruit.
Get them grass raised if possible, because interestingly, they are also being fed corn and soybeans because it's cheaper than grass.
It's just so calorie dense, yeah.
And the problem is the omega-6 linoleic acid, which is in corn and soybean, which is the bad part of the seed oils. If your diet is all corn and soybean, like these cows have, they actually get high omega-6 levels in their meat. So their meat is less healthy because it's been fed these kind of unhealthy grains. So if you can get grass-fed,
grass-fed, fruit
is high in fructose, high in sugar. But the argument is, hey, we've eaten fruit for millions of years or hundreds of thousands of years as humans. How can you say it's not healthy? Well, the fruit we eat today is not the fruit from 100 years ago, or even, maybe 50 years ago, but fruit today is engineered to be high in sugar, high in fructose, and it's nutrient poor, just like many of the vegetables we get. So fruit, I think, is okay in small amounts, but I never drink fruit juices, never drink my calories, so I watch out for fruits because of the fructose.
What about vegetables?
Vegetables, I think, are very healthy. What
about those bags of frozen ones at the Kroger that I like? Is there any nutrients in that whatsoever?
Yeah, I mean, depending on how they're raised, again, they're organic, regenerative raised vegetables, just like regenerative raised beef can be healthy when the nutrients are in the soil. So I think vegetables are good. I used to be a vegan for many years, and
that's just so you could survive on the west side of LA.
Exactly. Yeah. No, but
oh, come on! I love taking.
I mean, it's like politics are everywhere now. Now, being a vegan or being a carnivore is almost a political choice, and I want to say, to my audience at least, I love my vegan friends. I'm no longer vegan. I've been a vegan. I love my vegan friends. I've been a carnivore for a while, and I love my carnivore friends. I think you can be very healthy or very unhealthy at either one of those extremes.
See, you're about to be canceled by those vegans.
But it's junk food. That's what you've got to get rid of. Junk food's high in carbs, high in seed oils, and high in grains.
So good.
I know. We're engineered to like it. If feeds on our dopamine and
I
our
agree.
addictive mechanisms.
I agree.
I'm a recovering junk food junkie,
no,
actually.
the problem is it's the damn kids in the house with their little goldfish crackers all over the place. You know?
Yeah,
That's the problem.
No,
I don't want
know.
to throw it out. I'd be wasteful. It's like, no. All right. So first, nutrition. All right. You said there were 4 things. Second was, I know you said exercise. Was that
sleep? Yeah. Second was sleep.
So let's talk about sleep. Coach me up.
Well, I don't carry the beeper around anymore. I mean, if you have a job where you have to take calls, just be very careful of the amount that you take and be very mindful that you get enough time to recover. I've stopped doing it all the time now. The other thing I used to do is like most people, I wake up with an alarm clock, and I always get up at a certain time. But now what I'm doing, I'm being very mindful about my sleep. I go to sleep at a certain time. I've got, teenage kids, they're young teenagers. So I can go to sleep at like 9:30, 10 o'clock. And then I wake up every day without an alarm clock. I know when I wake up, it's time to wake up. If I need an alarm clock to wake up, I probably haven't had enough sleep, So that's a clue also.
What advice would you have for the everyday guy and gal who's like, hey, look, I gotta get my kids to school at 7:45, which means I have to wake up at 6. My body isn't ready to wake up, but I have to.
Yeah, part of it's the ritual and the routine. I mean, I used to stay up way late and drag out of bed at the crack of dawn because I had to be at work, and I was sleepy. But now going to bed at 9:30, I was up at 4 this morning and I walked for 5 miles with weights on my back.
Rucking.
And then I came, rucking, and I worked at a Starbucks for a while, which opens thankfully at 4:30, and do different things like that. And then I come back, my kids wake up at 6 to go to the bus at 7. So I'm there, I'm engaged, I'm totally with them.
So yeah, it's and to piggyback on that, what I've had to tell myself is like, look, if you have to get up at a certain time and you feel like you're not getting enough sleep, there's really only one controllable. Is like you just got to go to bed earlier.
Yeah, I mean, there's no magic in it, and we've all heard Elon Musk and other people talk about, well, I only need 4 hours and I sleep on the floor of the Tesla factory.
God bless those people. I'm not one of them.
Well, I don't think they're one of them either, because actually there's some pretty powerful studies that coming out. We talk about in the book that show that if the number of hours, forget quality, but the number of hours of sleep you need, it's a U-shaped curve, and it centers around 8 hours. And if you get much less or much more, heart disease goes up, cardiovascular events, all these other illness.
So it goes up if you get more.
Yeah. Too much sleep is harmful too. Something's wrong there too.
My life doesn't allow for that, but sometimes the too little sleep, sure. Okay, so and is the you think 8 hours? That's kind of the magic number.
That's what the evidence. Okay. That's what the evidence shows.
Nutrition,
it appears.
Sleep. Let's talk exercise.
Exercise, yeah, both mental and physical exercise.
What is mental exercise?
Mental exercise is like we're doing now. We're thinking, we're talking, we're engaged. It's like where we're actually participating. Instead of watching a Netflix show,
you're using your brain.
Read the book, and if nothing else, you're engaged that way. Instead of listening to music, play the music yourself on the piano or something. Or, they always say learn an instrument or learn a language. For me, I'm learning Mandarin Chinese. I'm on day 1500 of Duolingo, which is a free app that I do 5 minutes a day of Chinese, and it's only 5 minutes, but it's every single day.
Are you getting better?
Well, this is a tip for language learners. It doesn't have to be Chinese, but if you have a smartphone, and everybody has a smartphone today, whether it's Apple or Android based, set your Siri, if it's Apple, or your Hey Google or whatever, set the language of your phone to your language of choice. So I'm learning Mandarin Chinese. So I set Siri to Chinese. So I go, hey, Siri, set a timer for 10 minutes. And, actually, it doesn't understand English. So I have to speak Chinese.
Let's see. It's talk Thai. Jack talk Thai.
Ding shi qi 20分钟. Let's see. Yeah, said it there. I'll see if I can get it to respond. 定时器20分钟. Anyway, my sound is turned off, but it set a timer for 20 minutes there.
That's pretty cool.
But
that sounded good.
Yeah, it basically cross-checks your pronunciation. My wife's Chinese, but she always tells me I never get it right on the pronunciation. This won't lie to me. I know that
your wife's Chinese. That's a cheat code. Here I am sitting there like, man, I'm sitting here like, that's badass, dude. You're so motivated. You inspire me. And I'm like, wait a minute, hold up. You got to learn Mandarin because you got to understand all the mean things your wife's saying to you that you don't know.
All the kids know.
You're not fooling me.
The next step though is to change your laptop operating system to the language. I haven't done that yet. That's my
think what type of language would I choose?
Level.
I feel like it's got to be Spanish, just from a practicality.
Yeah, Spanish
like
is great.
Southern California, Tennessee, and most of the Western hemisphere outside of Brazil speaks Spanish.
Yeah, that's a great language.
I already know English, so kind of. I speak some English.
So that's the mindset
flex your brain.
Part. Yeah.
And what about physical exercise?
Physical exercise. I used to think, I play volleyball on the beach, or I ride my bike, but actually, it's more nuanced than that. It's actually strength training.
Weights.
Resistance training. Mm-hmm. So it can be bands, it can be free weights, machines.
Especially as you get older, I think I've read a lot about like a bone disease and actually just in general longevity. A lot of it has to do with your ability to maintain and keep muscle and.
Yeah, and it's actually metabolic health too. The amount of muscle you have helps you metabolize the glucose and the insulin, all these metabolic factors. And even these truly revolutionary drugs, the GLP-1 agonists that are, transforming obesity and diabetes and soon metabolic disease, they only work if you do strength training as well.
You skip leg day?
Today? No, I was rucking, so I
was going to say, it's the leg days that get you where you're just like, man,
I know. Everybody skips.
But the legs are the biggest muscle,
Yeah.
So hit those squats. All right. And so we touched on nutrition. We touched on sleep. We touched on exercise. And what was the fourth? Stress.
Stress is interesting because stress is, it affects everyone. It drives, inflammation, it drives insulin resistance, all these things that drive all those chronic diseases that we talked about. So what is stress?
Stress is for kids, dog. If you want to take my kids, I just solved number 4. That's easy. I'm going to give you my kids for 10 years and I'm stress-free.
Yeah. Well, no, that's the amazing thing about stress. Like all these other things we talked about, there are things that we have to do things we have to do. Stress is really interesting because I used to think my stress in my life was what happens to me in my life, all this stuff coming at me and everything. But actually, stress is not a result of what happens to me in my life. Stress is a result of the meaning that I assign to what happens to me in my life. For example, if someone goes in for a cancer surgery and, it's extremely painful, it's extremely stressful, it maybe one of the most stressful things they have in their life. Well, you can take another person that could go in for almost the same operation, the same amount of pain, the same everything, and it's a joyous experience. Why is that? Because it's the birth of their child through a C-section, and so the actual things that happen to us, I walk outside, it's a rainy day, my clothes are ruined, I feel stressed out. Or I walk outside, it's a rainy day and wow, in Southern California, we need rain. It's a beautiful thing. It smells great. I love the rain.
Right?
Yeah, it's a perception and the meaning. We walk outside and we walk down the street. Do we see danger? Do we see harm? Do we see, like we said, do we see the world as a harmful place? A dangerous place, or do we see the world as a loving place full of opportunities, full of potential? I just had the opportunity to attend one of Joe Dispenza's courses. He's a doctor, physician who uses a meditative technique to using placebo effect and other things to actually change your relationship with your past and change your relationship with your future, even to the point where you you change the future that you get. And I went to a meditation retreat down in Mexico with him and 2,000 other people on the beach in Mexico. And it was amazing experience, but it's about how you visualize the future and what's happening. And I believe that you really can change what's in your body and through your mindset. It's so important. In fact, it may be one of the most important things for all of these lifestyle things is the mindset we have, because the will to live.